Hi, welcome to Leaving the Lies and Speaking Your Truth. I'm joined today by my co-host Ariyl Fuentes. Ariyl, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Mel?
I'm doing very good. We just want to
I'm
remind
telling you,
everyone, say that
before we
again.
get started, let me say, Mel, I got to tell you, you look smashing today.
Well,
I
thank
was like,
you.
look at you.
You look pretty darn cute too. I love your hair.
Well, thank you. I'll take it.
Okay. And we just want to remind everyone out there to please like, follow, and share us on YouTube and also on Facebook. That helps to support and spread the word, which that's what we want to do is try to spread the word. Today we're going to do an episode that is talking about the positive side of being in a cult, which I've gotten a little flack about this from some people because it can sound kind of confusing. We're not promoting or telling anybody to go join a cult, so don't get the
Right,
wrong impression with this title. We're not
right,
encouraging you to do such a thing at all. We are just trying to explain and show that there is a positive side to explain not only how people end up in a cult or join a cult, but how and why they stay as long as they do. Because if it was all bad, they wouldn't have members, and this does help explain, especially to somebody who's never been in a cult. This is going to help explain why people join cults and why they potentially stay for years or months or whatever it may be for each individual person. Being in a cult and leaving a cult can be a very traumatic experience. And if there was a portion of it that wasn't so intoxicating in some ways, it would be a lot easier to leave and a lot easier to process and a lot easier to transition back into society when you left. People that are leaving a cult need patience and grace and understanding because they
right.
do have a lot of confusing, conflicting emotions when they leave. They need to be allowed to express even the positive aspects of that, the things that they miss, the reason that it can be hard, the reason you might want to go back or be drawn to going back. Just like in an abusive relationship, you leave an abusive relationship and people will say similar things to you. Why did you stay for so long? Why did you stay in a relationship like that? Well, again, it's not all bad. You stay in those relationships or in that abusive situation because it's not all bad. The biggest question that people get asked is that why did you stay so long? And that can be the question that actually makes a lot of ex-members really uncomfortable because it's not an easy answer and it puts you on the spot. So in order to fully explain, we are going to go through this today and try to help everybody have a better understanding of all of that. So
And I'm glad that you brought up about abusive situations because probably 8 out of 10 times, most of these people are not only in a cult, but they're also in an abusive situation. So they're doubled whammy. So I know one thing that I encountered when the cult was coming down with some stuff and the counselors were coming after me and the judges were coming after me. I feel it was at that time that my ex-husband would all of a sudden become very nice and very kind and very just, all together. Well, he's protecting me. He's watching over me, is what I would think.
right.
Or if he was doing something that was mean or abusive or whatever, and then I would turn to the counselors, there were times when then all of a sudden they were nice or they were kind and understanding. So it was a constant two-edged sword, not just for women, but I would venture to say also for men.
I agree
um,
because men can be in abusive relationships too, and just a cult in itself is a
yeah.
mirror of an abusive relationship, especially if it's somebody who's not in a position of power and they're just a normal member. They are under other people that are manipulative and controlling and going to try to work them, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. 1000% I believe with you. I believe that you had just said. Um, the biggest thing is the people. What I mean by this is most people who join the cult are good, normal, loving people who are looking for the same thing: acceptance, belonging, community. You have this immense amount of fellowship that you don't even really get from the real world, and it's hard to give that up. In a lot of cases, you build lifelong bonds, and it gives you a built in social life that you don't need to really think about. It's just always there. So out in the world, per se, you're trucking along. You're going to work. You're paying your bills. Your kids have got to run a soccer. You're doing your groceries. It's mechanical. Everything you do, it's just one, two, three, four, five, and your life is so much different than from other people's life that sometimes who do you talk to about something that's going on in your life? Are you comfortable about talking with people that may not have the same spiritual belief as you? And then other people's lives are so busy, so you become very lonely. And loneliness can lead to depression, which can lead to you reaching out and trying to find something else. And then that's where, when you go to that first feast, I mean, people are sitting out around bonfires. People are waving to you. Oh, shalom. How are you today? What's going on in your life? And you can sit there and stand and talk for hours. I know as a teenager, when I went and I first met you guys, in a typical situation, when you're a new kid on the block, which, being from a military family, I was often the new kid on the block, you're sometimes shunned, or it's not real easy to make friends. I mean, I walked up onto the group of you and we were instantly, it's almost like we knew each other from the word jump. There was, no hesitation, no anything. And then when like, for instance, our parents, Sandy, your mom is my mom. My mom and dad were your mom and dad. Your dad was my dad. We had t-shirts made for him that said the two dads, and it didn't matter where you went. And even as we grew up, it didn't matter where you went.
I think you got your nickname on your first or second feast.
I did.
Didn't Margot give you your nickname?
She did.
We all called you Sunshine.
Yep. Because she said my smile just lit up the room. And Margot's pastor's daughter was Yisrael Hawkins' daughter. And that's how comfortable even the overseer's children were to new people that came in. It was just very community. I can remember we had just gotten done getting ready for a feast, and I was hot and I was tired, and a bunch of you were sitting in a circle around outside one of whose ever tent it was. I think it was Karen McMillan's tent. And I had my overalls on and my big hat.
I remember your overalls.
And somebody wanted fresh oranges. I was just told to grab the bag of fresh oranges and just bring them over there. Well, I had not seen the movie Still Magnolias yet. So I walked over there and just chunked the oranges. And I said, there's your stupid oranges. It's so freaking hot out here. And sat down, and Karen McMillan started laughing, and she goes, I knew you were Weezer. But that's how comfortable we were with one another, that fellowship, that camaraderie, that everybody belonged, no matter fat, skinny, black, white, poor, rich, whatever. Everybody got along.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say, for me personally, the fellowship and the feast in general are the things that I missed the most when I left. That was the hardest thing to give up. That was the thing. That's why I created the group that I did that when we left, I Remember the Love group, because I just missed everyone. I missed that fellowship. That was the thing that was the hardest for me. I remember missing that. I remember the first feast I missed. I cried. It was very, very difficult. Even though I knew I didn't want to go back, there was a big part of me that didn't want to go back. There was a part of me that was very sad that I was missing that.
And, to go along real quick with what you said, Melody, people, they'll say, well, you can go to church. Church has spring flings, and church have this, and church have that. But even in today's society and churches, they're not they still have their cliques. It's hard to get into certain areas. You're not accepted by everybody. And that's what I really want to point out. There was an overall acceptance.
Yes.
That everybody was a part of it. Now, were there inner best friends or whatever? Sure, but there wasn't that clique.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we did make everybody feel like they belonged, or they made you feel like you belonged when you started and you joined and you came and when you were new. And that was the hardest part of leaving, for sure. And the other thing is that cults are a combination of good and bad. I know we've talked about this before, but that is a big factor why people stay as well, because cults aren't all bad. And if if they were all bad, no one would join. That's just the facts. I mean, they tend to have that combination of truth also mixed into their teachings as well, which also helps to make you stay, and is also another positive aspect, is there is some truth there. And usually people start to leave when the bad starts outweighing the good. And for every person, that's different. That could take months for some people, and that could take, 5 years. It could take 20 years. It might take 30 years. It just depends on the person.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Now, one thing, and this really rings true to me, and I think it rings true to us in what we're doing here. Not everyone in the cult is bad. Not everyone in our particular cult is bad. And you know what, Mel? I'm going to step out on a limb.
Go ahead.
Everybody I knew was actually pretty good. Of course, this was back when it first began. Very helpful, very kind. And it wasn't until Yishmael got some power after his brother died, and then could see. I feel that's when Yishmael saw the manipulation that he could do. And most of the underhanded, I would venture to say 95% of the underhanded, dishonest manipulation and lying comes from Yishmael Hawkins. And was saying that most of the people in leadership positions didn't start out that way. I know they didn't start out that way.
Right.
There is a certain woman that 9.5 out of 10 times, if you mention her name, they're like, oh, I can't even stand her. Here's the thing, though. I knew her before she was in a leadership position. She was laughing, joking, smiling. She was very kind. And that comes to my next part. Most people in leadership positions don't start out that way. However, they are being forced or manipulated into doing things that go against their core beliefs.
Yep.
And they do this thinking they have no choice to do what they are told. Other times, they are promised positions of power, being able to tell other people what to do, what should go here, what should do this, I control your life. And unfortunately, if somebody has that little bit of ill tend to take, to hurt somebody, or they're dealing with stuff, they take that power too far.
Yep.
And I'm going to venture to say that most likely those people that are drawn to that power and then become manipulative when they receive that power, it's most likely they already had some of that black in their soul to begin with. Does that make sense?
I agree. And I think most of the ones who are genuinely good or have good intentions at heart do end up eventually leaving, because eventually they just can't handle that inner struggle that it creates.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, as far as like my personal experience, I know of a lot of elders and elders' wives that did things when they were in the house of Yahweh that they now regret, that do not represent their real true moral character of who they are as a person outside of that environment. But that environment creates or causes them to do things that are against what they really believe at their core.
Yes, and they're manipulated, and they're basically guilted into doing what they do, and then they just feel guilty over doing it, and then this is shame of I have to do it, and then it's all twisted and manipulated to them. I had 2 different counselors, Mel, both of them female. One was just, it's like she didn't care, she just didn't care. She and then I had another one, she would sit there and listen to it, but I'm telling you, I would look into her eyes as she would talk to me, and you could tell the pain and the anguish and the hurt she felt as she was having to do it.
Right.
And
so that shows a nice contrast between somebody who didn't seem to really, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say have a heart or have real empathy towards another person, and somebody who just probably had that before they went in, probably
Right.
had that before they were a member, and were just a very empathetic person very naturally.
I agree. I agree.
Now, remember, just because we are willing to speak out about the good parts of being in a cult or being in a controlling group or even in an abusive relationship, because we like to use that collation a lot, that it does not change the overall experience, good and bad. And don't think that we're doing this episode again to try to promote cults. We are merely trying to explain the positive aspects because it gives you the whole picture.
Yes.
If if all we ever talked about was the bad, then people would have a very difficult time understanding why any of us were there. Why were you there? What did you do? Why? My mom will tell you that the very first time that my dad showed her one of the pamphlets that showed the holy garments on it, that, and he said, well, what do you think? Was one of the probably second pamphlets or third pamphlets we'd gotten a hold of. And my mom said, well, I think it looks like a cult. And in hindsight, she was right. But at the time, we were like, well, let's not judge it too quick, because we were reading a lot of things that were truth. And we were like, well, let's just wait and see. And so my dad went down there by himself first to kind of get a feel for whether or not he thought this was a good place he wanted to take his family. But my mom's initial instinct was to think that it was a cult. Maybe we should have listened to her.
Maybe.
Just saying. But then I wouldn't have met you and all those other wonderful people. So it's just part of my journey. It's just part of my journey. It was meant to be, and I wouldn't be here doing this with you.
Exactly. And one thing I would like to stress to people is that when you find out that somebody was in an abusive relationship or a cult, and they're telling you about the good times, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't say, what? Because the thing is that I can only speak for myself, Melody. I can't speak for you.
Right.
It reminds me that I'm not a bad person, that I'm not a stupid person, that I have no guilt or shame, because there was good and positive things about the cult taking place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it can be hard not to shudder when you hear somebody that is coming out of a bad relationship or a cult to say, oh, well, I missed this, or I missed that, or this was really good, or, I can see how people who've never experienced those things would be very like, whoa, taken back and not really know how to fully react to that. And they would come across as, and that does come across to the person on the receiving end of that as being very judgmental. And then you become less and less open to sharing your story and your experience because you're afraid of being judged. And you've already dealt with enough of that when you were in the cult, believe me.
Exactly. This part right here. Boy, Mel, when you came up with these and assigned them, I tell you what, you must have said, you know what, let me specifically give these ones to Ariyl. Cults try to take a complicated world and make it seem very simple. And that it does. It makes you feel very protected, very tucked in, very good surroundings. This can be very attractive to many people. Example, for us, following the 613 laws, we were taught it should be very simple. Just follow the rules and you'll go to heaven. But in reality, they made life more complicated. Now, I read this, and when I read this, I thought to myself, oh, just follow the 613 laws. Oh, yeah, it's that easy. And I sit back now and I go, what were you thinking? Because you've read and studied those 613 laws, and that ain't no easy. And it brought to mind to me Matthew 7:12, verse 12. And so everything do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophet.
Oh, that is so funny you say that, because I have my personal notes right underneath there, and it's very similar, and it coincides with what you said. I think that focusing on and following a set of rules or laws like that is actually, I think, the people of the Old Testament missed the bigger picture, and I believe that's why the Messiah came back. to establish the law, not to abolish it, but to explain why it was there to begin with. Because by following all these little rules, they were missing the big picture, which really was about loving each other and respecting each other and loving the
Yes.
Creator. And so many of them just became so focused on the letter of the law that they were losing the love for each other, because it was all about following all these little steps, and they were becoming, for lack of a better word, more robotic. Just
Exactly.
going through the motions but not feeling it.
Well, if you remember in Exodus, Moses went to the Creator and he said, they want laws. And the Creator said, no, you don't. And he said, yes,
Right.
you do. Yes, they do. And he said, no, you don't. And because he said, finally, I always think of my Creator like my dad. How many times did I say, but I do? And he's like, no, you don't. And I'm like, yes, I do. And he's like, no, you don't. And then he finally goes, fine, have it. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute now. I can't handle all this. I don't want to touch the stove again because it's hot.
Right. Exactly.
So, and it speaks of so many times that the greatest of this is love, faith, hope, and the greatest of this is love. And you're exactly right. They missed the bigger picture, and how they complicated life even more was now you've got to figure out money. Now they don't let you. There is no such thing as spare the rod, spoil the child. They'll. I can remember multiple times going, I gave your child a spanking because they did something. But I don't know you like that.
Right.
Or they would come in and take wives and tell them you have to live in a little camper because you're on punishment.
Right.
Or, you have to wear a mat on this day, but you don't have to use the mat, for when you're clean or unclean.
Right.
And you're exactly right. It was the letter of the law, never the love of the law.
Well, and it too, to me, that was part of the thing for me with the multiple marriage thing. Was I remember thinking that who would cause this kind of pain? Why would a Creator do this? I don't understand this. And it goes back to that loving your brother as yourself. And if you think about it, would any man want his wife to have a second husband living in the house next door? And if you would not want your wife to do that to you, why on earth would you do that to her? To me, it's just that simple. It's just that simple. If you would not want it done to you, don't do it to somebody else.
And the thing is, it comes all back down to it. If you were really to study the scriptures, somebody probably needed to be taken care of.
Right.
And push the issue. Because remember, at this time, God was talking to them like you and I are talking.
Absolutely.
And he probably said, fine, then take them. You guys are going to learn one way or another.
Right.
And
exactly.
Well, they learned. They crashed and they burned.
Yeah.
So they pick and choose what they want from the Bible to make them happy.
Absolutely. And my next thing I already covered, so because I've gotten a little wordy.
I love you, Mel. Just because it wasn't all good doesn't mean you won't miss parts of the being in the cult. It's a natural feeling this way, and you are not alone. Don't beat yourself up for acknowledging the best parts of being in a cult or even being in a abusive relationship. The fact that you recognize this and can ease some of your own guilt about why you stayed so long. You know why you did, but it can be difficult to explain that to anyone that has never been in a similar situation. So, not only was I in a cult, I was also in an abusive situation. Here's the thing. Was my ex-husband abusive from the word jump? No. Not to the extent that he became.
Right.
He was, you knew my ex-husband very well, even before we became married. He was fun. He was outgoing. He had a lot of energy.
Absolutely.
He was always kind to people. He was just a great guy. And the fact of the matter is, he gave me my children. If he did nothing else right, he gave me my children.
Absolutely.
And as far as the cult goes,
and there's a side to him that is very good. There is. Mm-hmm. There's a side to him that's very, very charismatic.
Oh yeah. And you were almost drawn to him. You
Absolutely.
know, here's something I'm going to share with you and those that are watching. After I left, it was probably about 2.5, 3 years after I left. I had gone over to my dad's house, who was still in the cult. I had gone over there to see him, visit with him, whatever. And I came out on the porch, and there's my ex-husband, and he grabbed my hand and he said, "I love you. I've always loved you. I know I wasn't good to you. Please come back and be my wife." Very just charming, kind. I could see the man he was before I got married.
Right.
You know,
Exactly. Yep.
obviously my answer was I didn't have no second guess on that though. I was like, let go of my hand, I gotta go. You know, but you know, and here's the thing: did he do a lot of horrible things? Unimaginative horrible things. But at one time, he was a really great guy.
Yep.
But please keep in mind, he also became Yeshua Hawkins' second in command.
Right.
So there's
Right.
the proof right there on the manipulation and the guilt and shame.
Absolutely.
And there are times when I really do miss being in the house of Yahweh. Now, you know what I would give to be sitting at a bonfire on a nice fall night with the Wisconsin group eating me a bratwurst?
I've thought of the same thing, like as far as like us creating a reunion of all the ex-members. I was thinking, man, it would be so much fun to do that
Yes,
because
yes.
we still have such a connection with each other based on the good and bad that we experienced together. It's bonded us. And
Mhm.
it would be I mean, it would be complicated to
Oh, yeah.
try to plan it, but
Yeah,
in theory, it would be amazing if it could happen.
exactly. I mean, this is something I think about. I'm just going to throw this out there.
Okay.
You had Rhea, Carol, and Peter. I'm not going to say their
Right.
other names.
Right.
And they would sing, play tambourines, play the guitar.
Oh yeah, it was
I
like being
mean,
at a concert.
come on, honey. We were 16 years old drinking a wine cooler. How much cooler could it get? It was a blast.
It was.
So there you go.
When you remain in a bad situation, that part of you knows you shouldn't be there because it causes something called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a state of having inconsistent thought patterns, beliefs, or attitudes, especially if it relates to your own behavioral decisions. It's very mentally confusing when you feel a strong need to participate in something that goes against what your core moral beliefs are. And I don't know if you have any examples, Ariyl, but I did write down some examples of what I think I did that caused a lot of cognitive dissonance for me within the cult environment. For me, the biggest one for me was separating myself from my family, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, my cousins. And I remember there was a part of me that knew that wasn't right. There was a part of me that knew I was hurting my grandparents by not accepting Christmas presents. It killed my grandmother. And I don't think she got over that till the day she died. I think that because it was important to her, and it really hurt her feelings that we just cut her off like that. And that, I think, is the biggest thing that I remember doing that I felt so conflicted about, but yet they were telling me that if you believe this is what you have to do, you have to follow this, and you can't accept Christmas presents, you can't go to gatherings, and you separate yourself from your family. And for me, that was very difficult, and it caused a lot of mental confusion in my mind because it felt so wrong to do that.
I I can remember our first Christmas. My Aunt Margie always brought over a whole bunch of gifts, and I had to give them back to her.
Yeah.
And I could see the hurt in her face. And that hurt
Yeah.
my feelings. Um, no, and you have to cut your friends out that you may have in the world. Your whole life has to flip upside down. I completely understand that. For me, it was the constant feeling shame.
Mm,
Because for me, I was still in high school and I would judge girls.
Right.
or judge boys, oh, how could you wear that? Or how could you talk like that? Or how could you eat that? I
Right.
wouldn't out loud, but I would in my mind. So here was my this half of my mind going, how could you do that? And then this half of my mind was going, what are you doing? Why are
Right.
you being like this?
Right.
It was a constant turmoil I feel like I was going
Yeah.
through.
Well, because it does, being in a cult puts you in a position where you think you have a right to judge other people because you think you have all the answers and you think you know what's right and wrong. And I will say that is something that you really question when you come out, and you really analyze that in yourself, and I think most people adjust that, make
Mhm,
adjustments for that.
mhm. The good parts of being in a cult can cause you to doubt your decision to leave. This confusing aspect of leaving a cult or an unhealthy relationship is probably a big reason why most people tend to focus so much on the negative aspects of their experience. I can completely agree with that. When I first came out, I didn't want to think of those that got left behind that I absolutely loved. I didn't want to think about them. I didn't want to think about the gatherings and stuff. I only wanted to focus on the bad because I was so fearful, so scared that I would go back. So I had to remind myself completely. Um, when you focus on the bad, it helps to reinforce your decision to leave. I think it also helps you not to go back, which I just spoke on. It really did help me to be mindful of that. Um, you know the parts where it is good, but you keep reminding yourself of all the bad because you don't want to be drawn back in. Don't let the good memories deceive you into another unhealthy situation, such as another cult or toxic relationship. And here is the thing. Here is the thing. And you watched me do it, Melody, when we first started this. There was a particular person that I said, well, I don't know. I don't know. I kind of wonder if they did. And then the more research we did, the more people we talked to, the more people that communicated with us. I mean, I just shared this with you the other day. Um, Melody, whatever made me think, oh, I don't know, let me rethink this. It's because I was going back over the good and trying to make sense of why this would have taken place and why this would have taken place. And the fact of the matter is I don't need to make sense of it.
Right.
It wasn't right. Just because I was in it doesn't make me a bad person.
Absolutely.
It just was what it was.
Absolutely. And I don't, did we mention, I don't think we mentioned that, but I think a lot of people that leave abusive relationships do the same thing. They know there were good parts, but they tend to really, once they make the decision to leave, they tend to really focus on the negative and the bad parts of that relationship and that person for the same reason, because I think they're worried about being drawn back in. They're worried that if they remind themselves of the good parts, they may be tempted to go back to that relationship. And it's very, there's a lot of parallels, and we talk about it all the time. We might have to do a specific episode on that, the parallels between a cult and an abusive relationship, because there are so many of them.
And there is, and here's just made me, I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Um, so if you when you leave the cult, you're no longer protected to have, even if it's just a shack. Even if it is, you got to borrow upon borrow upon borrow. You still get fed. You still get food.
Yep.
When you get out into the world, it's not like that. You pay your bills. You live in a house. You get, you go to the grocery store and pay money. You get food. Well, sometimes it gets very rough and very hard, and that's when you can slip into one of two ways: push forward and do what you got to do, or you can become so angry
Yep.
that just, it's because I was in there that things are this way, and now things are this way, and then anger and just builds and builds and builds, which is going to come to another episode that we're going to do.
Yeah.
But that's another reason why they tend to protect themselves from having to go back.
Absolutely. And you do need to allow yourself to acknowledge the best parts of the experience and remember that you did stay for a reason. I think most ex-cult members will focus on those negative aspects. Oh, I did. I already mentioned that about being in an abusive relationship, and I actually just have someone that I know that came out of an abusive relationship, and they're hesitant. They were hesitant to speak to me about some of the positive things. And I'm like, it's okay. You should be able to speak about those positive things, because if there wasn't positive, you wouldn't have stayed. So it's okay that you feel that way. It's okay to say, that person was this and I really liked this about them or that about them, because there are good aspects. And if you acknowledge the situation as a whole, then you are able to heal, I think, wholly.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't acknowledge the good and the bad, I think it actually can make the healing more difficult. In the beginning, I understand sometimes you have to just focus on that negative to keep, it's almost like horse blinders. Okay, just keep moving forward. I can't look to the side. I've just got to focus on getting to the other side of this process and the healing. But after you're there, I think once you know you're in a safe enough place that you're not tempted to go back, I think then you do need to go through all of the aspects and go through that whole process. Because if you don't, it's hard to move forward. And I think that's part of the reason that we wanted to do this, is that I think a lot of people who leave haven't focused on the positive, because it does ease a lot of that guilt to say, okay, this is why I stayed so long. Those feasts were fun, and we had a lot of fellowship and we had some good times.
And I think another reason why they don't want to admit that there was so much positivity about it is because society as a whole, because they're not informed,
right,
makes, whether they intentionally do it or not. And I feel like a lot of people don't do it intentionally, but they shame you.
Yes.
They shame you for seeing the good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back to the love bombing. When you first join, members tend to be overly nice to you. They ask about your past, they ask about your life, they ask you what you're doing for a living, and no matter what your past is, they don't judge you, they listen to you. You're invited to share meals and spend time with with members that have been there longer and that know more or seem more important.
Yep.
This unnatural amount of attention also serves as a distraction. It causes you to let your guard down and makes you more vulnerable to be manipulated even more. Because why would they ask me to do something that would potentially harm me if I'm eating dinner with them, if they're asking about my past, if they're accepting of me? In this crazy world, who wouldn't want to be a part of the group that makes you feel loved and accepted and even special? It is the strong feeling of community that is greatly missed when you leave. Studies have shown that empty feelings is what leads a lot of people to go back or to join another cult or another cult-like situation. Now, I would like to go back up to the parts where it says it makes you feel loved and accepted and special.
Absolutely.
The casting of lots to become an elder, a deacon, a deaconess, to be the head over a work cleaning group or the cafeteria, to have the overseer come over to your house for dinner, to have the elders or one of the elders or their wives friend you. And let's face it, you're in a religious organization where it's all about peace, love, and acceptance. Who's going to touch my child? Who's going to hit me? Who's going to starve somebody? Who's going to take my money that I have? That's not going to happen, because look at all this stuff they're doing for me. Absolutely. And how accepted I am.
It creates a false sense of security, where then they can more easily take advantage of you.
And then once it does happen, bam. What did that really just happen? Yep. Did I really just either partake in it, or did it just really happen to me?
And very similar again to an abusive relationship. Usually, in the beginning of an abusive relationship, you're being woed. You know,
Oh, yeah.
you're getting flowers and attention and flattery and all of this stuff. And then suddenly it's like a Jekyll and Hyde. You're like, wait a minute, who is this person? This isn't the
Mm-hmm.
person I remember dating. Um, but the reality is that feeling of nirvana cannot be realistically sustained on a long term basis. And at some point, you start to feel like you're part of a Stepford situation. And because you become conditioned to not truly think and feel for yourself, and you have to put on, like you've said before, Ariyl, a certain face that you need to show the group. But anything that you're truly feeling, you can't express if it doesn't fall in line with the teachings. So those feelings are left, you're left feeling very alone when you're feeling like that, because you don't feel like you can say, hey, I'm questioning this, or I don't know if this is right, because you learned through the conditioning that it's not acceptable to question the teachings, that you don't do that, because then you suffer consequences. So you learn to hide that. And I think that got worse after I left. And I think you suffered a lot more of that kind of pain because because that's when the multiple marriage thing. And I think a lot of us, especially women that are involved in multiple marriages, have to become like a Stepford wife. They have to just kind of robot themselves into making themselves look like they're accepting this, when really deep down they're a part of them is screaming and dying, and they're sad, and they're grieving the loss of the marriage they thought they were going to have.
And so a lot of people are now sitting there going, well, then why stay when you're feeling that? Because here's the thing. I can turn to my sister Melody and say, my heart is breaking. I can't believe he took on another wife. He's not doing this. He's being mean to me on this. And now he's thinking of another wife. And my sister Melody is sitting there going, my heart breaks for you. I'm so sorry for that. I understand that you're scared and nervous, and I'm here for you. And together we can make it into the kingdom of Yahweh, where the greater jewels in our crowns will be. Because my friend Melody thinks that she is doing according to God, to Yahweh's plans.
Right.
And so here I am able, because if I go out into the world and go, hey, my husband thinks he's going to take on a third wife, they're going to look at you and go, you're crazy. But if I can turn to my sister at arms with me and confide in her, and she's building me up, well, then I'm not as scared.
Right. Absolutely.
So, once you see it for what it truly is, and the curtain of deception comes down, and you see the reality that the cult is, very few people knowingly join a cult. You don't wake up one morning and go, hey, let's join a Jim Jones cult.
Yeah.
It's just usually presented in a way that is alluring and beautiful and peaceful and comforting, and it's almost like coming home. In the beginning, you're usually encouraged and offered answers to life's big questions, and then offered eternal paradise.
Absolutely.
Then once you are completely indoctrinated, that is a large word, into the cult, the leader, whether himself or the people that he has put in charge, then they begin to use fear and manipulation to make you feel trapped, ashamed, and that you have no other place to go to. Because whoever you go to, whether it be family that you hadn't been in touch with, whether it be friends that you hadn't been in touch with, if you go and talk to them, they will think that you're crazy, or that you're stupid, or that you're just a liar for staying in that type of situation. Right. Here's the thing. I could not go to any of my family members, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, or anything, because I had been told so many times by certain people I was in the cult with, they won't believe you. I've already told them what a liar you are.
Wow.
So what I would like to say is, please, I implore of anybody watching this, please be kind to those that have been in a cult or an abusive situation. Just let them tell your story. Just you don't need answers. You don't need to ask questions. Just let them talk to you, even if it's just a little bit at a time. And if they look at you and say, do you have any questions, then ask. But if you don't have, if they don't offer that for you to ask, the hardest person for somebody who is getting out of an abusive relationship or out of a cult is the word why. That to me, for me personally, Melody, that is the most shameful, hardest word that I hear, because I was in it twofold.
Right.
And I don't have an answer for them.
Right. And because the answer is complicated, the answer is taking this whole episode. That's what this episode is about. It's
Yes.
about explaining that answer. There is a reason why, but it's not a simple answer. How long do you have? Do you want to sit with me for an hour and listen? Because the answer is complicated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and we are grateful for our positive memories and for the things that we learned with our experiences. And we are now going to take this opportunity, and we have a little bit throughout this episode, to share some of our positive memories of the House of Yahweh. Ariyl, you go first.
Wow, some positive memories. Your sister and I mean, we had matching sunglasses, matching shirts, matching outfits. You and your jean purse with your big pockets, and if you needed anything, Melody had it. My beautiful Christy, always studious, always doing her work, always having to tease her. Come on and have some fun. The concerts, the spaghetti night, the praise and raisins, the candygram, because somebody better send me a candygram, at least two. The dances. Seder was my favorite night. The people, the bonfires, the camaraderie. Okay, can I mention it again? Wisconsin bratwurst. I can't say that.
You really like those.
Yeah, I did. The Marats always made sure. Here they are. I have so many memories and so many people that I absolutely just make me laugh and smile, and I'm so happy that I got to know them.
For me, overall, I will say it was the fellowship, but absolutely the feast, the people. I loved Seder, the music, and especially, like, do you remember doing the Song of Moshe at the Seder dinners? I loved that.
Yes.
It was so fun. And just feeling like you're part of something and part of something important. My memories of us getting married around the same time, my memories of us getting pregnant for Eric and Sarah around the same time. I have so many good memories of just being even part of the Hawkins family. I mean, the leader Hawkins family. I had really good sister-in-laws that were so loving and good to me. I had a wonderful mother-in-law who treated me very well. Those are all good memories. And really, even in the beginning of my marriage, I had a lot of fun, and it was a lot of joy. And we hung out with you guys, you and Yedidia. We hung out with Margot and Mark, and we had fun. We played cards. I have a lot of good memories, and good brother-in-laws too. I have good brother-in-laws. I married into a very good family, with the exception of my father-in-law. And really, even at the time, he was not a bad person to me at that time that I was in there, but he slowly did change and grow and become more devious. I mean, calling me the bitchiest bitch by the time I had left over the pulpit. That was a little cutting. That hurt. I won't lie. But just, exactly. Wisconsin group, the Canadian group, I loved all of that, caravanning.
Louisiana, yep.
Yes, there were so many fun times. And absolutely feasts were number one in my book. That fellowship that we felt there, that basically what a feast is like, for anybody out there who doesn't know, is we came together for 8 days during Passover and Tabernacles. Were both 8 days long, if I'm remembering right. And we basically were camping outside. It was like camping with the funnest people, and everybody. It was like being in a commune, actually, for about 8 days, really. And it was wonderful. It was awesome.
Let me just correct one thing, though. No.
Okay.
I didn't camp. I didn't stay in a tent.
Okay, yeah,
I
that's
stayed in the trailer. And the one time we had to stay in a tent, and you remember this tent, Mel, we had beds and couches and kitchen table, and my daddy had made my mom a sink and everything. I didn't camp. That wasn't me. That was this one over here.
I did camp, and I still camp, and I like camping, but it's
Yeah.
not the same as going to a feast. I'll tell you. It's
Yes.
camping.
Yes.
The feasts are like camping on steroids.
Yes. Yes. It's like it's literally like Woodstock for
Yes,
8 days.
kind of is. That's a good
Mm-hmm.
example. That's a very good
Yeah.
analogy. And the other thing we want to share is some of the things we learned from being in the cult. And I'm going to let you start with that too, Ariyl.
How about you start, Mel?
Okay, I can start. I think that one of the things I learned is that you need to question things, and that people need to always come first. Like, follow your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Like, when I was feeling that I shouldn't be separating myself from my grandparents and my family, my aunts, uncles, cousins, I should have listened to my inner voice telling me that was wrong. And I listen to my inner voice a lot more now these days. I think I'm a lot more in tune with it because of that, because of what I experienced, because I had suppressed it during that time in my life. And now I'm like, wait a minute, if something doesn't seem right, my ears will perk up and I'm like, whoa, wait a second. And I'll step back and I analyze things a lot more than I used to. And I think it also taught me to not be so trusting of people, because there are wolves in sheep's clothing out there. Not everyone is good, and some people are out there to deceive you, manipulate you, take advantage of you, get money from you, get you to volunteer your time, whatever it may be, that not everyone is good. So, and I think and part of the reason I think maybe I believed that when I was in the House of Yahweh is because I was a little young and naive. And I think that tends to be a more naive thing when you haven't experienced a life. And we went through enough trials early on to figure out that, oh, wait, not everybody is all innocent and good. There are people out there that want to do bad things to you. So you got to be careful of that.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, that that I still have trouble with organized religion, because I liken it to being, and I don't have a better analogy, but I really feel like it's like being spiritually raped. And it's very hard, once you've experienced that, to not have walls up, to not have your defenses up, and to let that down and allow somebody else in, because you're worried that it's going to happen again.
Right.
So those are some of the things I've learned.
As you were sitting there talking, I was like, oh no, mine aren't that bad. And I think it's just because we have such a different approach
Absolutely.
to life in general.
Absolutely.
Whereas you're an open book, I'm a closed cabinet, you know. Right.
Well, wait a minute. You're on here though. You're on the air sharing your life with all these people now, so you're starting to open up.
And you know how hard this is for me. There's
Yes.
some things coming out that when it comes out, I just kind of sit there going, So I'm gonna bring off a couple of positive things before I go into the negative thing.
Okay.
For one thing, I can remember praying. I can remember being a young child before I was adopted, praying. It only taught me how to pray and trust even more in my Heavenly Father. Another great thing is it taught me how to study, but not just surface study the Bible. I mean, really dig into it, because if you're going to tell me something.
Those are good ones, and those are ones I didn't even think of, so that is good. I like that.
Know that I know how to use these study books, and we're going to discuss this.
Absolutely.
Another thing that the House of Yahweh taught me is judging. Before the House of Yahweh, during the House of Yahweh, man, I would look at you. Oh, why would you do that? Oh, blah, 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 blah. And because it was done to me so much, and it was done to me so much afterwards, because people had come to their own conclusion that were still there, that were still being manipulated, that were still
Right.
being told what to believe about me. It taught me to not be so quick to speak or to judge, but to try to be in their shoes for a moment.
Right.
Am I like that every time? Absolutely not. Am I like that more than not? Yes. Yes, I am. I have a more empathetic heart because of the house of Yahweh. Um, but one bad thing that it did teach me, my poor husband dealt with it, was my trust in men in relationships. It ruined it.
Right.
So, because of the house of Yahweh, I learned to have a wall, to not trust, to not fully love, to not fully give, to not fully commit. And that we've been together 21 years. And I have probably learned that in the past 17 years, 18 years. So those are the big things I've learned from being in the house of Yahweh.
I I appreciate that you actually had ones that I hadn't thought of, because that's certainly the ones about praying and studying are big ones that I really didn't even consider those, and that's I'm glad you pointed that out, because it's actually making me rethink some of the things that I learned too there. That I actually found some old paperwork and found like books of notes from my studying when I was in the house of Yahweh, because we're getting ready to move, as you know, and came across stuff that I didn't even know I had anymore. And one of the things was actually one of them was we had written down all the 613 laws in these notebooks back when we were members, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did it. And I had them highlighted and color coded, and I was organized, man. I had it down.
You were. I just want to say this real quick, Mel, because people have asked me, even yourself has kind of sort of asked in a particular way, why did you hold on? How did you hold on? Why did you do things? Job, the story Job in the Bible. I mean, look what that man went through.
Yep.
He never denied his heavenly Father. And because he never denied him, look how well he was blessed. So I held on to that for dear, dear life. Now, it took me a while to get back into organized religion. And even to this day, I do organized religion at my pace.
Right.
To be very honest with you. I go to church. I love the people I go to church with, but I move at my pace. But it was Job. It was Job that
That's
helped
awesome.
me to not lose my faith. And how I was triply blessed. Have you seen my two granddaughters, Gracie and Nenny?
Yes.
Need I say anything else? And then as of October 10th of this year, I will be blessed with two more, Mia and Zoe.
Oh yeah.
I mean, seriously, could I be any more blessed?
Absolutely. No, that's awesome. I want to thank you for doing this episode with me today, Ariyl. It's been fun. It's been fun reminiscing and talking about all of these things and sharing it with everyone out there. I also want to thank everyone else for your support, your emails, your private messages, your text messages. We've gotten so much support out there, and we want to thank you all for your support. The biggest thing you can do to help support us and support what we're doing here is to follow us on Facebook and YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you, Ariyl. Everybody, you have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, guys.